Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my favorite reads of 2025 slash anticipated books of 2026 video. I'm putting this out, I think, a couple of days past the new year, which might put me at the tail end of the trend, which starts more in December and often peters out, by the time the new year hits. Although if you haven't done it yet, I'm encouraging you here and now that it's still okay to do. These videos are always really fun, just an exciting time to highlight the best parts of reading in the old year and the hopes for the new year. I think that's part of what makes these videos so fun and special. And it has me thinking a bit about my reading trends in general, that I think for the past several years I've been much more actively involved in reading and reading more and more books per year. And there can be maybe a negative side effect to that, or maybe it's the prompts that I'm choosing for why I'm reading what books I'm reading. But, fewer of them impress me. And every year I have fewer and fewer like 5-star picks that knock my socks off. And that always gets me a little bit sad and a little like sort of dissociative even from my reading experience. But I do think I am ending on a high note now, because I was looking back and thinking on some of my reading from past months, and a lot of my 4-star books, of a variety of 4-star books that I have, and 2 of them really stuck out to me as ones that I kept coming back to and thinking about again. So I decided to up their ratings to 5 stars. So that makes me feel more optimistic again about what I'm reading, and that more of it is moving me than I previously thought. And in fact, I decided to add one of those 4 to 5-star reads as one of my top 3 reads of 2025, which I'll ramble about briefly now. And after that, I'll get into 5 anticipated books for 2026. So in third place, the book I decided to up from 4 stars to 5 stars is Good Morning Midnight by Lily Brooks Dalton, which I read a couple of months ago, and then I finally watched the Netflix adaptation, which was called The Midnight Sky. And yeah, this book particularly stuck with me. I think part of what made it special was doing it as a book to movie adaptation thing, where first I read and reviewed the book, and then I read and reviewed the movie, and I'll link to both reviews down below. But anyway, in this book, it is the near future, and we are following particularly 2 characters, an astronomer named Augie and an astronaut named Sully. And this is a book that I feel like, well, on its surface, the first thing it made me think of is Station 11 comp, because it's literary post-apocalyptic fiction, because there's this unknown event on Earth that has turned the Earth into some sort of hellscape. And Augie has survived in the Arctic, like at this very remote research facility. And his major front story is he's now there alone. Everyone else decided to evacuate, but he's a career astronomer. He decides to stay with his work, but he ultimately takes this stowaway girl named Iris, and they go to a research facility with a stronger radio antenna, because his major thought is that he wants to reach out to, astronauts in space to say, something horrible's happened at home. And that's where Sully comes in, because she and her crew are on the way back on their ship from Jupiter, and contact with mission control has completely stopped, and that's freaked them out something something fierce, and it's about them coming home and trying to come to terms with what happened, and Augie trying to reach them. And then there is a special connection that might be convenient in a way, but I just found it so moving, about 2 individual people, and how they might relate to each other and reach each other. It is literary in a large part because the writing is beautiful, and it's also very interior about these characters, and their drives and their careers and their past histories with their families, and what they left behind, and what they lost along the way. It's about lonely people connecting in this expansive post-apocalyptic backdrop, which in a way, that's somewhat like Station 11, where, we have the Shakespeare troupe, in the post-apocalyptic, post-flu future. But I also thought a lot about Contact, more the movie than, the book by Carl Sagan, which, frankly, I'm not as familiar with. I'm more familiar with Contact the movie, which is my favorite movie, really one of my favorite movies of all time, which is about an astronomer, Ellie Arroway, who dedicates her life to radio contact with aliens. And she finally does achieve that, but then it becomes more about her relationship to other humans and like a broader sense of humanity and contact with humanity and who she is as a person. And so I feel like that is very much in the vein of this book. And then the adaptation also was very moving, although it was a little more high octane. I mean, not very high octane at all, but much more so than the book. But I think it was a tour de force for George Clooney, who played Augie. But the book also, you know, had more access to other characters as well. So in that way, it was stronger for me. In second place, I'm putting The Latecomer by Jean Hanff Corlitz, which I talked about in my mid-year check-in freakout tag, which was my, you know, top book at the time, and it really stuck with me. This is a book about family as well. We're primarily following the Oppenheimer family. They're based off of a medieval court Jew, Joseph Oppenheimer, who was murdered in Germany based on probably trumped up anti-Semitic charges. And, you know, the parallel between him and his completely fictional offspring in the 21st and 20th centuries, you know, it's not a direct line, but I do think the more modern day Oppenheimers are existing in a world that isn't always kind to them as well. The major impetus of the modern storyline is that the patriarch got into this horrible car crash where he was driving, 2 people were killed, and it's just something that, you know, influences the rest of his life, that it's something he has trauma about and grieves, and indirectly it leads to him marrying somebody who was related to his girlfriend who died in the crash. And, you know, they're trying to go forward with their lives. They're trying to get pregnant in the 80s and are having no luck, so they try, which was then very new therapy, which was in vitro fertilization. And the mother ultimately has 3 fertilized eggs injected into her womb with the hopes that one of them would ultimately, you know, take. And this is after plenty of other, you know, lots of other treatments that never worked. And in this case, all 3 eggs, in fact, you know, took, and and triplets were born. And then we follow these 3 triplets and their lives. And they were supposed to be a family that, you know, it took so much to make them a family. And the mother especially had these dreams of them being this happy family. But instead, the husband is distant because of his trauma from before. And the 3 triplets are very different personalities. And they're antagonistic toward each other, and you know, they want a lot of distance from each other, and they make some decisions, particularly in college, that have an impact on the rest of their lives as well. So the novel's a little bit sweeping. There's a lot that takes place, especially in the early thousands when they're in college, and then about 20 years later when they're dealing with some aftermath. And part of the aftermath is that a 4th fertilized egg, which was put, you know, into storage, as it were, comes into the picture, because the wife decides, you know, she wants another go at being a mother. So she has the 4th child, you know, about 20 years later. And it is a story about family, and it's a story about trauma. It's a little bit a story about Jewish history. It's a story about the choices we make. It's a little bit a story about my generation, but not entirely. It's not really, Jean Hanff Corlitz doesn't get into a lot of the cultural touchstones, but a little bit into them. And so I just found it really moving, the characters and the relationships. And ultimately, you know, when you make mistakes, when bad things happen, but what you can learn along the way. And in my first place spot, I am putting Fagin the Thief by Alison Epstein. You know, I was very excited. I knew immediately once I heard this book was coming out in 2025 that I'd want to read it, but I had no idea how much I'd absolutely fall in love with it. This might be the part of the video where I have to admit that I have never actually read Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Fagin, of course, is one of the most infamous villains in Oliver Twist. And in the book, he is, as often perhaps, referred to as the Jew, as he is by Fagin, his last name. And his role in that story and in this retelling of sorts is that he is a man in London, a lower class man who takes up the profession as a thief and ultimately is a patron to, a cadre of child pickpockets, including briefly Oliver Twist. But this really goes back into Fagin's past. He's given a first name, which is Joseph, and it goes into exploring why this young Jewish Victorian man might have come down this path. It is definitely a book that doesn't mean to absolve Fagin of all wrongdoing, but it is a book that is meant to give him a lot more nuance than the original did. And it is really interesting to think about the fact that even back in the day, Dickens got a little bit of criticism about how Fagin was portrayed and the anti-Semitic undertones in the book. And he actually wrote another Jewish character into a later book to sort of address that. But I also think it's powerful to not write a one-dimensional white cap character as well. We're writing about a character who makes bad choices. He's somebody who decides he doesn't have a lot of options, but he does, decide to become a thief, and he acts in a lot of self-interest, but he also does have a bit of a heart and a bit of sympathy to him as well. And that comes out especially in his relationship with Bill Sikes, who Dickens much more overtly meant to be a one-dimensional villain character. But in this, Fagin's relationship with Bill Sikes gives both of those characters more dimension, and then there's also his relationship with Nancy as well. And as I was reading this book, I just was so engrossed. It's exactly the type of experience that it's the top experience I think I can have with fiction, is to just fall so head over heels for the characters. Not that I thought they were the bee's knees, but I was so engrossed in their struggles and in their stories and who they were and what was happening to them that I kept on wanting to. I was so excited every time to go back and back to Fagin's story. And I just thought it was, it gave just a beautifully complex look at Victorian England, and also to these characters, a complex look at the characters as well that just was very engrossing and very moving. And I think the ending, it struck a sweet spot between, I think the book had a very dark ending for Fagin, and then, the musical, which I have seen and liked, actually absolved Fagin of a lot, and he was able to sort of restart his life with The Artful Dodger. But this book kind of takes us to a middle place, and I also found that moving as well. And I have to say that I am intending to read James by Percival Everett very soon. It's a very similar novel in that it takes a arguably one-dimensional character from a historic novel and gives him more dimension. And I am very excited to read James, but I have to say that I kind of doubt it will live up quite as much for me personally to Fagin the Thief. Okay, and from here I am going to highlight 5 anticipated books that will come out in the first half of 2026. I decided 5 would hopefully keep it short and sweet, and I would highlight 4 genres that I try to read from specifically. I try to read front list from 4 genres before the Goodreads Choice Awards at the end of the year. Those 4 genres are mainstream/literary fiction, historical fiction, science fiction, and adult fantasy. And I also decided here to highlight a nonfiction title coming out, particularly a biography. So I'm going to go ahead and discuss them in chronological order based on what their current publication dates are. So the first book I'll talk about is Jean by Madeline Dunnigan, which is coming out on January 13th. And this is my obligatory new to me author, because I do try to get those in for fiction especially. And Jean is historical fiction. And it is in the vein of British male boarding school experiences, and more particularly British gay male boarding school experiences. I'm thinking of an Alice Wynne book I read a couple of years ago and really liked. But this one also specifically has to do with Jewish ancestry, because it's about a young boy with Jewish ancestry in the 70s who goes to a British boarding school, and I believe he will get into a same-sex relationship, so there should be a lot to unpack there, and I'm intrigued to see where it goes. The next book I want to talk about is literary/mainstream fiction. This is Not About Us by Allegra Goodman, which comes out on February 10th. This, I think, is Allegra Goodman's return to form. Last year, she published Isola, which was a historical fiction novel. I just read it, and it's just very outside of the wheelhouse of what she usually publishes, although it was a achievement, you know, and it's exciting to see her put herself out there. But this new book, I think, is very much a return to form. So probably a New York-centric or certainly contemporary American-centric Jewish family and their foibles, kind of like her Family Markowitz series from several years ago. So I'm definitely excited to get back to the norm a little bit with her. She has kind of gone out on a limb with Isola and with Sam, which was a coming-of-age story that came out a couple of years ago. But I do admittedly have a soft spot for her baseline, so I am excited to get to this one. Coming into March, I'm going into my biography pick, which is Mordecai M. Kaplan, Restless Soul by Jenna Weissman Joselit, which comes out on March 16th. And this is a biography of the man who de facto started the Jewish movement that I grew up in. It wasn't really his intention to start a completely new denomination at the early to mid part of the 20th century, but that's what happened because a lot of his ideas just were not jiving with the mainstream establishment of his day, particularly in the conservative Masorti movement. So his ideas about Judaism as a broader civilization took root in what then became the Reconstructionist movement, a very small denomination that I grew up in personally in the US. And so I'm excited to take a hopefully down-to-earth look at this man who, you know, was instrumental in a way to part of my own upbringing and to, you know, learn more deeply about, you know, what formed him. Staying in March, but going to the end of the month, we have The Kingdom of Almonds by Ariel Kaplan, which comes out on the 31st. It is adult fantasy, and it is the conclusion, I believe, of a trilogy that she wrote in sort of a portal world. This portal world is based off of the Spanish Inquisition and the Alhambra Decree of 1492, which was the expulsion of Jews, especially from, well, Spain and Granada particularly. And that's what's happening in this portal reality. And then there's a portal reality to the portal reality where we're in a place of Jewish magic that some of the characters in this story get embroiled in. The worlds are connected in that the Inquisition of the reality-adjacent world affects the magical world and the demons that reside in it, and our main characters have to fight to bring a balance back to that world, which hopefully we'll see come to its conclusion in this book. It's a very unique sort of mystical tale for fantasy, so I enjoy it for that. And the final book I'll talk about here, which is coming out April 14th, is The Faith of Beasts by James S.A. Corey, which is the second book of their new science fiction series. They were most well known for writing the Expanse novels together, which was turned into a wonderful IMHO Amazon TV series. This new book is a little less hard science than the Expanse. We're going more into space opera territory and imagining a scenario where human beings are, you know, residing on a planet and we see ourselves as, you know, masters of our domain, but we're conquered by an alien species that is able to take us over very quickly, and they force us into service for them, or the survivors into service for them. And we're particularly following this group of biologists around who are, you know, brought into specific biology-related concerns for the alien overlords, but of course there's the question of trying to overcome the tyranny and the oppression that these characters are living under. So we have some personality clashes between the leaders of the biology group and who's going to be able to stand up to these alien overlords. And, you know, the way I'm describing it feels so one-dimensional, but you know, it's all about how characters interact with each other and what we're able to learn about how civilizations work that makes this story very intriguing to me, and so I'm very excited to continue on with it. And that about covers it for me now. I will leave the Goodreads reviews or Goodreads links to all of the books I talked about listed down below, as well as a link to my playlist of old favorite and anticipated reads and books videos if you'd, you know, like to go back down that memory lane. And I have very much loved watching all of the other, you know, favorite and anticipated videos out there. And if you just want to share on my video in the comments what you're looking forward to, or, you know, what your highlights were from last year, I'd love to hear about them. Here's to a bright future for all of us in reading in 2026. I hope we're all able to find an equilibrium with what we're reading, we're able to get the enjoyment we want out of it. Reading is a bit of a journey, I think, especially when you read a lot of books. So, some are up and some are down, but I'm hoping to take as much positivity out of the experience as I can. And I'm going to use my ruminations of late, where I gave some 4 stars a 5-star rating in retrospect, to be optimistic about the future, and that hopefully I will find a lot of exciting new books to read, books that will, make me teach me things or make me think. Maybe not all of them will be 5 stars, but there's a lot of stuff out there that ultimately is pleasing in some way or another to read, so I'm excited to go on that journey. But speaking of moving back into recapping old reading, I hope to be back on this channel in the near future with my December reading wrap-up to talk about the final books I read last year, so stay tuned for that. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.